Today, I will introduce you to 8 photographs depicting 8 train journeys that could never reach their destinations. These cold, tragic trains claim the lives of thousands. Now, let's uncover the mysteries. The order of the accidents in this video will be arranged by me from least to most severe. Let's start with number 8. The Eschede train derailment occurred in 1998. This is a photo of the Ice 1 high-speed train, designated as train number 884, Germany's first modern high-speed train, carrying over 280 passengers near the town of Eschede in Niedersachsen. Although it was considered one of the most advanced trains of its time, no one could have anticipated that it would become the centre of a tragic disaster that cast a shadow over Germany. The train boasted numerous innovative features compared to conventional trains, including an onboard restaurant with a characteristic high-domed roof and many windows, allowing passengers to enjoy the scenery comfortably as the train sped along. Initially, passengers complained about severe vibrations in the dining car, with plates and cutlery rattling, causing discomfort. To address these concerns and improve passenger comfort, the company made significant changes to the train's wheels. However, these modifications inadvertently made the train more dangerous than ever, and the senior management of the manufacturing company completely ignored warnings from the engineers. Until Wednesday, June 3rd, 1998, while travelling near the centre of Eschede, close to Shell, a steel railway tyre on the third axle of the first train cabin detached and broke off due to metal fatigue caused by wear and tear. Passengers in the cabin began to panic as chaos unfolded. Among them was a man named Dittmann, sitting with his wife and child. They were startled and horrified when a massive piece of metal, fractured from the tyre, nearly struck his wife and child. Acting quickly, Dittmann immediately moved his family out of there. He then started searching for the conductor, as the conductor was not in the same cabin. When Dittmann found the conductor, he was told that they needed to assess potential damage before activating the emergency stop. The train began shaking violently when they intended to re-enter the damaged cabin. The damaged tyre wreaked havoc on the train's trajectory, with the wheels continuously striking the railroad ties at maximum speed. Within seconds, a chain of catastrophic failures occurred. Here is an image of the collapsed bridge that the derailed car struck. The pressure from the speeding train caused the concrete overpass to collapse, crushing multiple cars and passengers inside. This photo shows the first cabin still intact, and returning with Dittmann's family to the first cabin saved the conductor's life. This disaster resulted in over 100 fatalities and 88 injuries, marking the deadliest high-speed train accident in Germany's history. It left an indelible scar on the families of the victims. Following the tragedy, Germany's railway industry was forced to redesign train wheels, implement stricter maintenance schedules, and repair railway lines to prevent such a catastrophe from happening again. Number 7 also depicts a disaster that occurred. The Torre del Bierzo tunnel occurred in Spain, 1944. On the night of January 2nd, 1944, at 8:30 p.m., the express train 421, consisting of 12 cabin pulled by 2 steam locomotives, departed from Madrid heading to A Coruña. The number of passengers on the train was not officially estimated, as most passengers had not purchased tickets and were crowding to board, since this was one of the main modes of transportation at the time. After passing through various cities and villages, the train passed through the area of Torre del Bierzo in the province of León, where the railway winds through hills and slopes. This area has several steep and winding sections, requiring the train to slow down and pay extra attention while moving. As the train entered the Torre del Bierzo area, the malfunction began. The braking system failed. The train driver attempted to contact the station system at Torre del Bierzo, but almost all efforts were in vain, as the train continued to speed uncontrollably. with the loud sound of the horn echoing towards Tunnel 20. At that moment, a helper locomotive, used for pulling trains up steep inclines inside Tunnel 20. Train 421, unable to stop due to brake failure, collided head-on with the helper locomotive. Unaware of the ongoing accident in the tunnel due to damaged signal cables, the driver of a coal train with 27 fully loaded cars continued driving into the tunnel as usual. The consecutive collisions between the trains caused a massive fire inside the tunnel. The flames erupted from fuel, wood, and other flammable materials on the trains. The exact number of deaths from the trains was not officially disclosed. However, the latest estimates put the casualties at around 100. But similar to the railway tragedy in Germany mentioned earlier, most passengers were stowaways, so the death toll could be much higher than 100. Number 6, the train number 183 in Vietnam, 1982. On the screen you are seeing is a train that I found to give you a better idea of what is arguably the most horrific railway disaster in Vietnam. At that time, information technology and the media were not really popular in Vietnam, so I couldn't find any pictures of this accident, but the pain it caused and the horrors it brought at the time it happened were extremely severe. At 10 p.m. on March 16th, 1982, train number 183 departed from Nha Trang Station with a journey of more than 400 kilometers, expected to run for about 8 hours to reach the final stop of Saigon Station. This train is a kind of market train, meaning it runs on a fixed route and will stop at all stations on the railway map to pick up passengers and receive goods for transit like today's buses, with an average speed of about 50 kilometers per hour. In addition to passengers who are civil servants and citizens on business trips. So, in addition to passengers, there was also a large amount of goods on the train at that time, such as livestock, rice, filling many compartments. During the next 5 hours of the journey, the train was still moving safely and without any problems. However, the number of goods and people has been increasing through the stations. Around 4 a.m. on March 17th, 1982, when the train moved to Dong Nai province, it received a call that the security department would conduct a screening and administrative check on the train to detect smugglers. However, for some unknown reason, when arriving at Long Khan station, the train driver did not stop completely at the station, but only slowed down a bit to get the train card. Then, once again, the train driver did not stop at Dao Jiai station to pick up passengers and get the train card. Some people felt that the train seemed to be running faster, and there was a feeling of strong shaking. However, at this time, everyone on the train seemed to not feel that a disaster was about to happen. Around 5 a.m., when approaching Balcar station, at a nearly 90-degree C-shaped bend, while running at high speed, the train suddenly lost its balance. At this time, some passengers tried to rush out, but the exits were flooded with goods, so all their efforts to escape were unsuccessful. 10 out of 13 train cars flew off the tracks, accompanied by the sounds of sparks, and echoing in the atmosphere at that time were only screams. At this time, all the train drivers and staff on the train were dead. The number of passengers' fatalities reached more than 200. At this time, the railway industry gave the reason for the catastrophic accident as the train lost its brakes. As all train drivers and train crew were fatally injured after the most serious and unforgettable disaster. On the screen at this time is a picture of the railway cemetery, which was renovated and has a memorial stele in 2018. Now, let's move on to picture number 5. As you can see, the picture simulates the bodies of the dead beside the railway tracks. It's called the Balvano Train disaster. This is arguably the most horrific railway disaster in Italy, but we will not see any images of blood and chaos. But the scary thing here is that almost all the passengers on the train died, while this train was still intact, and it did not have any collisions. So what caused their death? It was March 3rd, 1944. Going back in world history, during these years, the world was at war, precisely during World War II. Italy was in a period of instability after being occupied by the Allied forces. Italian soldiers faced food shortages, relying on limited rations and seeking alternative food sources to survive during this challenging period. At this time, the Italian people were forced to use unofficial transportation, one of which was fare evasion. Trains were still quite rudimentary when using steam engines, burning coal, or poor quality fuels, so they often caused a large amount of toxic gas, especially in tunnels. Train number 8017 was a freight train, but it carried many people because they did not have tickets. The train has a route through a mountainous area with many tunnels, including the Galleria delle Armi tunnel, which is about 1.8 kilometers long. When came Ebola, some fare evaders were forced to get off the train, but after other stops, many people sneaked onto the train until the number of people on the train reached more than 600 and was extremely overloaded. At midnight, 0050, 8017 continued to move to the next station. At this time, it was gradually approaching the narrow Galleria delle Armi tunnel with poor ventilation. Suddenly, the train encountered was that the train wheels started to slip on the rails. It gradually loses speed until it came to a complete stop, with almost all the train cars still in the tunnel. At this time, the atmosphere in the tunnel was covered with carbon monoxide from the coal of the train. Carbon monoxide is an extremely dangerous toxic gas. Just inhaling a large amount of CO will lead to injuries due to decreased oxygen in the blood or damage to the nervous system, as well as possibly death. It's so dangerous that at this time, the train driver used all his efforts to try to start the train to reverse in order to get out of the tunnel. But all his efforts were unsuccessful, and all the train drivers, train staff, and hundreds of fare evaders died from inhaling a large amount of toxic gas. This is a picture of the Galleria delle Armi tunnel. As you can see, it is extremely narrow, and just looking at it makes us feel suffocated. The Italian government officially announced the number of casualties after this disaster as 517 people. However, according to surviving witnesses who were in the last carriages, the death toll could be higher because most of them were fare evaders, whose identities were not verified before boarding the train. Number 4, the Odisha train collision in 2023. This time, I will take you to a disaster that happened in 2023 in India. Do you want to know why, when 3 trains intersect, even though their departure and destination is not related to each other? That's when the tragedy begins. On June 2nd, 2023, the Coromandel Express high-speed train was running from Shalimar railway station to Chennai. At the same time, the Howrah-Bengaluru Superfast Express train was travelling in the opposite direction on an adjacent down line. Basically, both of these trains did not stop at Bahanagar Bazaar station, and they still received the green signal to continue their journey along the main line. At about 7 p.m, the Coromandel Express high-speed train was supposed to go straight up the line, but at this time suddenly turned into the loop line and suddenly collided with a freight train carrying iron ore, standing still on a branch line. The strong collision caused 21 carriages of the Coromandel Express to derail, with many of them being flung onto the opposite track and directly colliding with the Bengaluru travelling in the opposite direction, causing the last carriages of that train to derail. Here are the photos of the railway disaster accident. The entire accident scene turned into a wreckage. Numerous train carriages were completely deformed, crushing one another and piling up over the railway tracks. Immediately responded quickly to this unexpected disaster. More than 15 fire brigades with 200 fire engines, 100 doctors, 200 police officers, and many people in the nearby area were mobilized for rescue operations at this location. These are pictures of the emergency rescue team. Most of the fatalities were in the first 3 carriages of the Coromandel Express train, the exact number being 296 and more than 1,200 injured. And after that, the government also has compensation plans for those who have died, seriously injured or slightly injured, all have quite large amounts of compensation. For the next accident, number 3, the Guadalajara Train accident. This is considered the 3rd most horrific disaster on the list that I want to share with everyone. Following the course of events, let's together explore an overview of the milestone events that occurred in Mexico. In 1915, during a tense period of the Mexican Revolution, a military train was being used to evacuate hundreds of civilians and soldiers from the war zone. This train carried approximately 900 people, including women, children, and soldiers. It was one of the important trains aimed at helping people evacuate from dangerous areas during this turbulent time. On January 22nd, 1915, a special train consisting of 20 carriages departed from Colima. The train was extremely overcrowded, with some people even clinging to the roof and undercarriage in an attempt to leave. Shortly after, the train entered the state of Jalisco, Guadalajara. The train driver suddenly lost control while descending a long slope. As the train accelerated, many people were thrown off as it entered a curve, and ultimately, the entire train derailed. The scene was horrific as the train toppled and crashed violently. This accident is estimated to have caused the loss of between 600 and 1,000 people, but the exact number cannot be determined due to the chaos that ensued. Fewer than 300 people survived the disaster. This disaster shocked the entire nation of Mexico. The government organized rescue efforts, but the extremely dangerous terrain made reaching the affected areas nearly impossible. And the number 2, this time I want to convey to you, is a disaster that happened in Ciurea, Romania. The Ciurea rail disaster, 1917. In the context of the intense First World War, Romania's capital, Bucharest, was occupied by German forces on December 6th, 1916. This was a significant defeat for Romania, forcing the royal government to evacuate all civilians from Bucharest to Iași, located in the eastern part of the country, to avoid further attacks from the German army. The Ciurea E1 train, a special military convoy, was mobilized to evacuate over 1,300 people, including soldiers, high-ranking authority, and many civilians. On December 31st, 1916, the train departed from Galați after the city of Brăila had been occupied by German troops. As the train approached a steep section of track between the Barnova and Ciurea stations. At this time, a train carrying asphalt was parked on the main track. The train driver attempted to signal a warning and switched the train to the second track to avoid a collision. However, due to the high speed and sharp turn, the carriages behind the locomotive derailed and overturned, crashing into the asphalt train, causing a large explosion. The fire quickly engulfed the entire convoy, burning it down in just 2 hours. There are pictures of the accident, several carriages severely damaged by fire. The consequences of the accident were devastating. Over 1,000 people lost their lives, with only around 300 survivors. This is considered the most severe rail disaster in the history of Romania. And the final, number 1, the Sri Lanka Tsunami train wreck in 2004. This is arguably the most serious disaster in the world because its death toll is enormous. This incident happened in the famous island nation of Sri Lanka. At 6:30 a.m. on December 26th, 2004, at Colombo train station. The station was extremely crowded because at this time, Sri Lanka was having two major celebrations, which are the full moon festival of Buddhism, also known as Posan Poya, and the gift-giving ceremony on Christmas. People are now entering the holiday season, so the number of passengers is also much higher than usual. Soon, this 8-carriage train will begin a 110-kilometre journey from the capital Colombo to Matara, located in the south of the island. This journey is operated on Matara Express Train number 50, which is a train that regularly operates on this railway line. And because this train often runs along the coastal railway line, it is also known by a very proud name, the Samudra Devi, or Queen of the Sea. Earlier at 5 a.m., the seismic observatory located in Palakela recorded a magnitude 9.3 Richter earthquake, with its epicenter located in the north of Simeulue Island, off the west coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia, at a depth of 30 kilometers below sea level. This massive earthquake is said to have released energy equivalent to 23,000 atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima. However, experts at the time believed that if a tsunami occurred, it wouldn't reach Sri Lanka. By the time the Asian and Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning Center issued an urgent announcement about the tsunami waves affecting the coast, the coordination office in Maradana had made calls, but it was too late. All efforts to stop the train failed as other stations were unsuccessful. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, at 9:30 a.m., the train passed through Peralia in Galle, an area just 200 meters from the coastline. And at that moment, a massive wave, traveling at a terrifying speed of up to 800 kilometers per hour, was heading towards the shore from the southwest sea. With no defenses, the rolling train was struck head-on by the Queen of the Sea. The old engine system was suddenly overwhelmed by water, causing an immediate malfunction. The train slowed down and eventually came to a complete stop. Despite all attempts to restart it, it could no longer move. The passengers on the train were extremely scared at this time, but fortunately, none of them were injured. Some people from the nearby area ran to take shelter behind the train, thinking it was safe. Then, from a distance, a massive wave approached again, rapidly engulfing the entire train. People had sought refuge behind the train, nearly died on the spot. Panic spread as people began to shove towards the exits, but their efforts were futile. The train cars shook violently as the water level continued to rise. As you can see, there are images depicting the tragedy of the Queen of the Sea. An estimated 1,700 to 2,000 people died, mostly by drowning or severe injuries when the carriages overturned and were crushed. Only about 150 to 200 people were fortunate to survive by jumping off the train, climbing through windows, or clinging to nearby trees to escape the raging water. Rescue efforts faced many difficulties due to severe flooding and lack of specialized rescue equipment. Many people living near the disaster area were also affected, losing their homes and property. And that was the 8th railway disasters in history. Thank you for listening.